a management consultant's journey and challenges in the times of COVID-19. In this Bernie Chats with Adam Kolozetti, we'll have a free-flowing chat about his firm's digital transformation, team building, managing your side hustle, the future of the petroleum industry, and green energy. Let's get into it. Hey everybody, welcome to Bernie Chats. We're with Adam Kolozetti today from ENTA Solutions, a consulting firm based in Calgary, and we're going to speak with him about a number of topics. And we're going to have a free-flowing chat about different things regarding business and his company. Unfortunately, his lovely partner's not here to join us today. We'll hopefully have a follow-up session with Katelyn at some point. Adam, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself? Elevator pitch, if you will.
Sure. So my name is Adam Kolozetti. I'm from Calgary, Alberta. As you said, my business partner, Katelyn, is not here, but ENTA Solutions, we are a management consulting firm, and we like to say we specialize in perpetual epicness. What is that? Perpetual meaning that businesses need to make money to keep going and to keep changing. Epicness meaning whatever you're doing, we want people to think, wow, that was freaking epic, whether that's your customer service or how you're showing yourself on social media, or if it's a new idea that's super cool that's going to disrupt your respective industry.
So is epic more or less your mission?
Yeah, that's kind of our mantra.
How did you and Katelyn get into the consulting business?
Oh, well, there's a story. There always is, right? So we're both engineers. I'm an aerospace engineer, and Katelyn is a materials engineer. So the long and short of it is, Katelyn's materials engineer. She got involved in quality management, and we both worked for a bunch of large companies. I spent the beginning parts of my career in aerospace and defense, where the process rigor is really intense because, you know, if something breaks on an airplane, it falls out of the sky. The consequences are so high, you know, versus your washer dryer stops working. Right. So the engineering rigor and the process is much different, or at least more intense. So fast forward, I worked in oil and gas and then construction of high rise, and I found a lot of success taking what I knew from defense and aerospace and applying kind of a toned down version to other industries, because they didn't need, you know, the Cadillac, but the Volkswagen would be pretty good. And I just found that I was much better trained, and then I liked it. And I always said, the story is Katelyn and I met working for a large engineering firm, and we were working on a pipeline project. We were designing pipelines, and it was kind of a nightmare project. It was a difficult client with a lot of external pressures, as you can imagine, politics and media scrutiny on pipelines.
Sure.
And you know, yada yada, we got the drawings out. It was a big celebration, and then a few days later, you know, the project manager comes right out with having a panic attack because they started construction in the wrong place, which means they cleared a whole bunch of trees in the wrong place.
Wow.
And you know, wow, what happened, right? So Katelyn, being the quality manager, was tasked with doing an investigation and discovering the root cause of this, and it ended up being just a paperwork issue. So when we issued our drawings, you know, it was at Rev 2. We didn't change the little box in the corner to a 3 to make it Rev 3. So the contractor received the drawings, looked at the revision numbers. Oh, I have Rev 2, and threw them out. So that's it. It was one number, and that was kind of our epiphany. Where Katelyn and I looked at each other and we're like, you know, a lot of project work like this, the timelines are so intense, the demands are huge. And we're making these decisions without fully understanding the risk involved, right? The team members maybe don't understand, why is there this process step, and not connecting with what it was. Otherwise, you may have behaved a little differently. So we said, well, you know, there's pages and pages of these process documents that read like legal documents, right? We all know they're there, but no one's ever read them, right? It's really more tribal knowledge that's being passed. So is there a way where we can create this type of systematic structure that actually connects with people, that drives with them? And this is kind of where the whole business came out about. So we said, hey, let's start a company.
Right.
We like doing this stuff. Seems like nobody else does. So maybe there's a niche here. And at that time in 2015, everyone was getting laid off anyway. So we thought, hey, what do we got to lose? So
yeah, 2015 was a downturn in the petroleum industry in general, especially in Alberta.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, it was kind of a rough time, and it was really interesting to watch from a cultural perspective.
You were in the petroleum industry for how long?
4 years.
4 years? Okay.
Yeah.
So how do you see this whole thing evolving with the current economy, more electric cars, different people wanting to do different things? I was actually I was doing social media and webmaster work for a large natural gas company around the time of the oil recession in Alberta, let's say. And natural gas was what we call the bridge fuel. The conclusion was that it's not really feasible to just jump from petroleum to green energy. There has to be something to bridge that, and it has to be a progression, right? So what do you think of that concept, and how do you see this evolving? What do you think the future of the oil patch is?
I worked specifically in the oil patch for 4 years, but I've lived in Calgary my whole life. So,
Right.
Pretty much everybody around me works in the oil patch, and that's how they earn their living. And, it's funny because people that work in the oil patch, I would say, are the biggest, strongest believers in things like clean oil and sustainability and green. Like, they work very hard to make sure that that's done a very certain way. But I think in terms of the history of the oil patch, and I'll make some generalizations here. I know someone might hear this and disagree with a specific example, and I know they're out there, but I think when an industry or a group of people are making a lot of money and being very successful, there's no motivation to innovate, because with innovation comes risk, because you don't know if it'll work, right? And frankly, most innovations fail. You fail a lot more times before you succeed, right? So
When you're innovating, yeah,
you're trying new stuff. A bunch of them are not going to work, right?
Sure.
So there's a risk associated with that. So what happened is the industry got used to being successful by executing in a certain manner, and therefore they became very risk averse, because, well, why would I risk? Why would I do that different? And if I'm in a company and it's competitive, we're all climbing the corporate ladder, why would I do something? Why would I risk my position if I'm in a competitive, climb or race to the top? So
right.
you see this like cycle of like motivation and kind of what had happened here. The second thing is, if everyone's really, things are very great, things that people are happy, I don't need to worry so much about, vulnerability and leadership skills and performance managing and building trust with my team. As long as they're executing and doing stuff, everyone is being successful, no one's upset. It's great. And that went on for a long period of time. But what it did was it built a house of cards. So boom, 2008 happens, boom, it happens again in 2015. Now all of a sudden people are losing their jobs. Now all of a sudden people are worried. And what you ended up with is, on the leadership side, I think you didn't have that trust established. Again, generally I'm speaking, I'm sure there's pockets of greatness happening everywhere, but
Sure.
In a big company scenario, that trust isn't there, right? You didn't build it. You didn't put energy into it. You didn't have those Dungeons and Dragons games, right? Like that kind of stuff.
Right.
So
you're just riding the wave.
Yeah, and then you get this like kind of negativity, and then layoffs start happening, and the house of cards comes crashing down, right? So now, kind of the new era, price of oil, whether it's $50 or $60, it's not 100, 110, right? Now all of a sudden innovation looks pretty good, right? Because the old ways of doing things, you're not going to get the same returns, right? So what I'm seeing is a lot of technology startups, technology that can help you get more out of an abandoned well, for example, or on the sustainability side, saying, hey, you've got these big compressors out in the field or turbines. Why not stick a turbine on the exhaust from this compressor and produce green power? Like, why don't we do that and sell the power? Like, why don't we, where we have water runoff, why don't we stick a turbine in there and get some clean energy? So you're starting to see these innovations pop up all over the place.
Right.
I think the industry at large is slow to move. Just there's a lot of history there.
It's a huge industry. Yeah. There's a lot of
Yeah,
infrastructure.
exactly. Like social media, for example, like oil and gas people I meet in there, they're the last one. They're like, no, not interested.
Mhm.
Right. So we're starting to see these innovative startups pop up, and I'm really excited to see in the next few years, where this goes, because you're 100% right. Sustainability, green energy, not as oil dependent, not as gas dependent. Um, that's what the public is demanding. Whether or not everyone is educated on the subject
Mhm.
is maybe a different conversation. But I think there's definitely it's pushing the industry to diversify at the same time as all this COVID stuff happening. So, you got a lot of change happening really fast, and I think
Mm.
people's heads are spinning a little bit.
Yeah, so that's interesting. I guess the gist of what you were saying there is the oil companies are optimizing what they're doing to get the most out of the least amount of resources, right?
Hmm.
Is that part of it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And so that's becoming more efficient, and then I guess from there, transitioning is the next level to whatever, to wind, to hydro. Is that kind of the
I
way you
think
see it, or?
so. Like, I'm sure there's other people far more educated on the
Sure,
intricacies of the industry that could speak to it better than myself.
sure.
But I think, yeah, that there's an openness or a willingness or a pressure to explore some of these new
Yeah.
alternatives, right? I think, one of the things that maybe we learned from down in Texas, for example, is that it can't be all or nothing, right? You
Mhm.
need a nice mix so that the infrastructure can grow and support the needs of the people, the needs of the country, the economy of the country.
Yeah.
The country is a bit divided right now between oil or not oil, depending on where you are in Canada.
Right.
I think the truth of it generally lies in the middle, right?
Yeah,
Is
definitely. Take the middle path.
exactly, and that's a funny thing, right? If you ask people who are either extreme one way or the other, you're like, great, do it. And as soon as they talk implementation or doing it,
That's interesting. Yeah. One of the bright lights or the positive things in the whole thing is that there's a lot of new thinking coming into the industries, right? The people that are entering those industries or that entered over the past 10 or 15, 20 years, they have a different mindset than what has traditionally been going on. They're much more media savvy. They're much more aware of the environment and different factors. And I'm sure universities and engineering are probably teaching a lot more about alternative energy and stuff.
Mhm.
So, I mean, the people who run the oil patch and are the stewards of that, if you will, they're people too. They want a clean environment as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think they want to save the environment, that they want a future for their kids. Like everybody does. Of course we do. It's just a matter of evolving in a way that can economically sustain what we've built, right? It doesn't happen overnight. If you think about it, with all the recessions and layoffs that are happening, you've got a lot of very highly trained, smart people without work right now, who are
Right.
sitting around just thinking of stuff, right? So in a way, you're like priming the world for startups, for innovation, for new companies, for this, that, and the other thing. So you've got this primordial soup, I guess, if you will, of idea people with time and energy. I think it'll be really exciting to see kind of what comes of this.
Yeah, I think so too. I think we're in for a lot of positive changes when we come out of this dark tunnel.
Right? You
Yeah.
know, and sometimes I think, in hindsight, we say, oh, that was amazing. But you realize at the time that you came out of the tunnel already, even though it's still hard.
Hmm.
Um, so, I was watching a podcast with Brene Brown and Simon Sinek, and one of the rapid fire questions to Simon Sinek was, what are you most excited for in the next 10 years? And his
Hmm.
answer was the world. And you're like, wow, really? Like, we're in recession, it's COVID. Why
Yeah.
are you excited for the world? And he said, because of all this happening, we are being forced to ask questions that we never bothered at asking before.
That's right.
It has shifted our perspective. We are reevaluating things that we took for granted before, assumptions that we made that we didn't even make we're making. And I think a lot of great is going to come of this, and I can't wait to see what that is. And I thought, what a beautiful answer. I really enjoyed that.
That's great.
Things are fine and dandy when everyone's making money, but when the legs get pulled out of you, now all of a sudden you can see where the holes are in things like leadership and trust and the people dynamics.
Right. So you took a leap of faith at that time. You took a leap of faith that people would want your services at that time in a declining market, right?
Yeah, and a lot of people said you're crazy, and we said, well, yeah, maybe, but I don't know. We just feel like it's the right thing to do, and it was kind of a on the side passion project for a while, and then
great.
That's exactly what happened. Is because of the petroleum downturn, and people that we worked with either got laid off or left, and there was musical chairs happening in the industry. Companies are now taking a look inward and saying, hey, we're not making money hand over fist. We need to have a look at how we're doing things. Why are we doing things? There's a greater demand for social purpose now from consumers, from people, right? People want to know they're buying from, someone that believes in clean oil and environmental and sustainable energy and all these things, right? That you're giving back to the community. So in a way, the recession drove a market for our type of services, which we were lucky enough.
So how's the journey been? Has it been, did you say to yourself, okay, we're going to go into business and it's going to be this way? And did it turn out exactly that way? Or were things a little different along the journey?
No, it's been an adventure.
It usually is.
There's two big things that happen that, we came from a world of engineering. So we thought, hey, let's try and sell our services to engineers, because engineers very smart, but very analytical. And although they're very good at what they do, they often suffer on the team building side of things with companies. The culture is often stressed because, sometimes those people skills aren't as strong. They need those extroverts of the group, right? But we quickly found that didn't work very well, because engineers are already convinced they know how to do everything anyways. So hard to tell.
They didn't get the soft skilled side.
Exactly. They're like, well, show me the calculation that shows that will improve my business. And we're like, well, I can't. Right. You just kind of have to believe it a little bit. And that's the tricky part of some of these more intrinsic.
So do you actually do like a corporate culture assessment where you benchmark employee satisfaction and things like that, or?
Yeah, we have a couple of things. We have a free kind of business evaluation. It's just a quick and easy 20-question survey that helps you gauge kind of where you are in a variety of areas. Great. And that's, you can pull that off our website for free. But we also do, so our culture program, so this is kind of how it all ties together. So we have a culture program. It's called Bedrock of Success.
Bedrock of Success.
Yeah. And the first thing we do is we survey everybody, and we ask them about your own personal values, and that what you think the company's values are. And then we look for matches later, and we ask people, what do they think the vision of the company is, and what do they do, and all that. And then, we use that to start the conversation with a company about defining their values, defining their vision and their mission, right? Like, here's 30 people, there's 25 different descriptions of what you do. So this is where we start, because we want to make sure that we connect with whatever we build to people. So if people say that, hey, entrepreneurship is just a core of our business, we love new ideas, we love innovation, we're always in for trying something new, then you better build a process that allows for that, right? You're not going to build a, strict, sort of rigid, you must do this, you must do this, you must do this type answer. But back to your original question about things changing. So this is how we ended up dealing with these small, medium-sized businesses, because we switched gears. Feedback from social media really helped guide us to our target market. The second thing that happened was, of course, a year ago, almost exactly now, when COVID hit, Naturally, consultants, everybody kind of freaked out, and consultants were the first phone call to stop all services and projects. So we very quickly, in a couple of weeks, lost, pretty much all our contracts. We had a few
Wow.
little ones that didn't. So yeah, pretty scary. We're dead in the water, and I blew my Achilles. I was at the gym training. I was doing Muay Thai. And
You were doing Muay Thai. Okay. I knew we were going to get around to Muay Thai and martial arts at some point.
Yeah.
So
yeah, my Achilles blew, and that was like 5 days before the lockdowns.
wow, that's a really painful and serious thing.
Yeah, it was very very loud, very violent.
Really? It was loud. Wow. So you must have
Yeah,
been right on the ground, I'm sure, with that.
yeah, I was just kind of standing there, and I lifted my knee up, and then there was this explosion. Like
Wow.
It sounded honestly like a floorboard cracking.
Yikes. How's it now?
You kind of look around, and then my leg just didn't work. It was just so.
Wow.
I was on crutches. The business was dead, and we were like, well, what to do? So kind of grim, right?
And they have to go in there. Do they have to go in there and fish it out and pull it back or something like that?
Sometimes it'll snap and it'll like roll up.
Yeah.
But lucky mine didn't do that.
Oh,
But yeah, they used to do surgery always. It happened to my dad when he was young. He's got a huge scar. But actually, what they do is they put your foot in a cast with your foot pointed,
mm-hmm.
and it just grows back together.
No kidding. Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, I was in a cast for, I think it was a month or something, and then you get one of those boots, those air boots that you can take on and off to shower. And it had lifts in it. And every week I would take a lift out and slowly flatten my foot out.
Wow.
So yeah, I was only about 10 or 11 weeks before I had that off and I could kind of walk again.
It's a lot to go through. I did a full year with a full length cast. So I can kind of relate to the anguish to go through.
Yeah, no, I got very efficient with my traveling because you're on crutches.
I became an expert on crutches.
Yeah, I could get around pretty well. And I had my hip replaced in last October.
Oh my God.
So my good leg was the one with the dead hip, and my bad leg was not. So yeah, that was a mess.
So how much of this is related to Muay Thai, and how far did you go into Muay Thai? Did you reach, I don't know if it's a black belt level in Muay Thai or what it is?
Yeah, so I started when I was a kid. I was 12 years old when I started. So
why Muay Thai? It's not that common for kids.
No, at the time, let's see, a lady that worked with my dad, her brother was a world champion, and he worked he taught at one of the gyms in town. So
nice.
He's like, hey, let's try it. And at that time I was played a lot of hockey and soccer.
Yeah.
And I was having issues with a lot of retaliatory outbursts. So my parents were looking for a way to maybe give me something to channel that energy. Yeah. And so yeah, Muay Thai presented itself, and I went on the first day, and we did some jumping jacks and did some punches, and then he showed me this really cool move where you pull someone's hands down and throw a knee, and that's it. I was hooked. I never stopped going.
Oh, that's cool. Okay.
Yeah, this is amazing. This is awesome. Good. So yeah, flash forward. Now I have a 3rd degree black belt in Muay Thai, and I teach it. Well, I was teaching before the lockdown anyways.
Right.
And yeah, it's a huge part of my life.
That's great.
Probably always will be. But to your question, yes, throwing thousands and thousands of kicks probably did not, help out with my hip.
Sure.
Which the story with that is, turns out they went in and fixed it, and it said, hey, you have hip dysplasia that was never diagnosed from when you were essentially born. So that's why the degeneration was accelerated. So
are there things from that practice, from Muay Thai and being that intensely involved in martial arts, that you bring to business? Are there correlations there, or lessons learned, or?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Martial arts, is very much about discipline and control and keeping calm under pressure, right? Mm-hmm. And then the other side of it is just, grittiness. To teach you how to be calm, one of the things they'll do is they'll try and exhaust you first. They'll make you run and do push-ups, and So it's push you to a state of exhaustion so that you're not, so tense, and so like gets you out of your own head because you have no energy left to try and give to that. So that grittiness. So when, of course, we lost all our contracts, for example, that's kind of when to dig in. For us, it was digging into social media and digital marketing. So we said, okay, well, we're engineers. Let's learn this. We'll turn it into a science if we have to. But we took some courses. We watched like a zillion YouTube videos.
Yeah.
We watched a lot of Russell Brunson. If you've
Yes.
heard of
ClickFunnels.
He became our hero essentially. And then lo and behold, after implementing this for about 3 minutes, we started recording, our kind of homemade version of a podcast, right? We talked about stuff. We started putting videos out. And then lo and behold, after about 3 months, we started to gain a little bit of traction. We started to, target very specifically the people we wanted to connect with on LinkedIn. We started to produce messaging that was interesting. We learned what people liked and what they didn't like. And then, lo and behold, we got a contract. Then we got another one. Then we got another one, another one. And
that's great.
And it worked. It really worked for us.
And would you say it's mostly on LinkedIn or on other channels too? Because a lot of people think of social media, it's changing now, but they never used to think of it as a B2B channel. They used to think of it as more B2C, right?
Yeah, like we're primarily on LinkedIn.
Yep.
I mean, that's definitely more professional and business related.
Great.
We've recently started branching out into Facebook. We've got a Twitter account. We don't really use that one much. But then Katelyn is having some fun with TikTok because
I saw that. She's learning TikTok.
Yeah, it's kind of a fun new one, and it's just one of the most up and coming platforms. So although the audience is a lot younger for that particular platform, those people will eventually become business decision makers. So, and that's probably the biggest piece of advice. And Russell Brunson says the same thing. But if you're getting into social media, pick a channel, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, TikTok. Pick one, and just the one that speaks to you the most. For us, business to business, LinkedIn made the most sense. If you're straight to the consumer, then like Facebook or Instagram might be a good place to start, especially because they're linked. If you post on one, it automatically goes on the other. But yeah, pick one, kind of learn the language of one and get good at one. And then after a while, once you're good at it, once you've got a following, once you're feeling really comfortable and confident, then think about branching into others. So
is that your main source of prospecting for business or looking for new business is social media now?
Yeah, LinkedIn, 100%.
And are you doing other things or just focused on social media and generating? Are you doing paid ads or are you doing primarily just organic?
Well, we actually have yet to ever buy an ad.
Okay, good.
We're probably looking at buying our first ad soon here.
Okay.
Well, that's trick number 2. Ads. We meet so many people that say, "Oh, I spent $1,000 on a LinkedIn ad and it got me nothing."
Right.
But if you're on LinkedIn, have you ever clicked on an ad that you didn't recognize, even if you saw it a bunch of times?
Yeah, it has to be really in context.
Yeah, it has to be. And so that's kind of the trick, right? Is you build up your content and your following. So people are used to seeing you. They're used to seeing Adam do these types of videos and say these types of things. And I think he's funny or he's witty or, he's got a nice mix of, professional videos about consulting and other ones that are more personal and whatever. And then I get used to him. And then I pay for an ad, which is what we're doing now. And all of a sudden his ad comes up. I'm like, oh yeah, that's Adam. I know that guy. I'll click on it. Right.
Right.
So you're kind of hedging your bets before. And unfortunately that just takes time. That's not something you can cheat on. You just have to do it for a period of time. So we've been doing it now probably 8-9 months, like seriously.
Okay.
So that's how long it took us to kind of build up following, where I think between Katelyn and I, we've got 9,000 followers between the two of us.
Wow.
With surprisingly little overlap, like only 300 people overlap or something.
Which is a lot on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Yeah, and it turns out, we'd meet all these people and we'd meet collaborators, we'd meet people like yourself, Bernie, and we'd talk. And we'd be like, hey, yeah, we do management consulting, like, whole business. We do culture stuff. We do process stuff. And they'd be like, well, yeah, but I see your social content everywhere. Can you tell me about that? Like, yeah, okay, sure. This is what we do.
Yep.
Wow. How do you find the time to do that? And that's.
Well, that was my next question is what do you do for actually taking the time to do that? And are you doing it all yourself? How does that work?
So definitely it's daunting, especially if you've never played with it. I mean, God knows it was for us. Like we had kind of dabbled before the COVID, and then fortunately we had some time on our hands, but start with once a week, 10 minutes, put a post on whether it's LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever. You don't even have to make it this amazing thing. Like people get caught up in this idea that, I'm going to put something on. I need to professionally produce it. I need to tweak all the, hours, tweaking.
They're trying to make it epic.
Exactly. And yes, it will be epic, but then we found that people just ignore that stuff. They don't care.
Yeah.
The epic that we found for social media is being genuine, being raw, and being vulnerable. So my most viewed video ever is I was working out and I took my phone like this and I filmed it and I was sweating and I was talking about grit. And I was like, this is what grit means to me. And, it was kind of like pretty intense because I was like working out.
Sure.
That people ate it up. People loved it. And then I turn around and make like a really cool animation about root cause analysis.
Yeah, you never know what's going to fly on the internet.
Yeah, and that's not to say that stuff isn't important. Like I said, it's good to have a nice mix because people, they'll see the Adam working out video and then they'll kind of check me out and then they'll see some of the other stuff. So it adds credibility to me if I have that professional stuff there as well. And what we're seeing now happening is people are going back and watching that. So stuff that had like no views before, now all of a sudden it's getting views because people are checking us out and kind of binge watching our stuff. Right?
Okay.
So in terms of time, what I say to people is, okay, don't try and like change your routine and change your life overnight. Like once a week, 10 minutes, post one thing, start there. And then, move to twice a week and then move to 3 times, eventually get your way up to once a day where it's kind of part of your routine. You're good at it. You're used to it.
Yeah.
You got your kids at the park, they're playing on the slide. You whip out your phone and you're like, hey, I just thought of this, kids at the park is just like, here's this great metaphor and blah, blah, blah. Right?
Yeah.
So you can get used to it from that perspective.
So sort of incrementally and developing comfort level with it. And
yeah, exactly. It's like,
because it can be overwhelming if you have never done it before.
Yeah, it's like a new skill.
Familiar.
Yeah, and I'm still kind of finding my voice, right? If you look some of my earlier stuff, I'm kind of quiet and I'll be like, hey, this is Adam. I wanted to talk to you about this time. It's not that interesting.
Right.
Now as I get better at it, I'm trying to be more animated. Like, hey, you got to check it out. This is amazing. Like, right? Trying to Russell Brunson it up a little bit. So you kind of find your voice after a period of time. So, start small and recognize that in the beginning, your stuff won't be great. And, people always ask like, oh, I don't like being on video. Do I have to be on video? The answer is no. You can do video, you could do just sound, so like podcast, or you could write a blog. Like if you love to write, then write. Like just write cool stuff.
Yeah, I think we all have to figure out what we really can do well or enjoy doing. Usually it's connected. What we do well, we tend to enjoy doing. So I think that's really important to be natural that way and be able to figure out where that niche is where you have a comfort level. But that being said, you don't get into it without some discomfort and some effort, right?
Yeah, 100%. And that's, back to that whole thing of martial arts, that's where the grit, that's where the focus, that's where you kind of have to just have faith because it's not going to work overnight. It's not like you're going to put a post and then wait for the phone to ring. It won't, right? You got to be consistent for a few months before, you've got to do some targeted, you got to put in the work. You got to filter out the people on LinkedIn. LinkedIn's great for this, right? You can use the LinkedIn Premium Sales Navigator to search for exactly the people in the positions, in the geography that you sell to,
Yep.
and then go message them.
Yep.
And do it in a way that's not salesy. Like, your inbox is probably like mine, Bernie, where I have, I get, I don't know how many messages a day from marketers trying to sell me stuff. And I pretty much ignore all of them. But then I might get one that says, "Hey, Adam, I saw your profile, thought it was super cool. Would love to connect with you." And then I'll go check that person out. Yeah, this looks legit. Absolutely, let's connect. And then, I might get another message later. It says, "Hey, thanks so much for being in my network. You can see what I do, so I'm not going to try and tell you anything. But if there's anyone in my network I can introduce you to that you might feel valuable, please reach out. I'm happy to send you more info on what I do, or here's a link to a cool video."
Yeah, I think what you're describing there is a conversation. So if you can have conversations with people, just like, if you meet somebody for the first time, or some people do, but you don't get into, sales pitches right away. You create some rapport, right? Is
exactly
the most effective, and I think it's the most acceptable for people.
Yeah, and people always ask, like, well, that's a lot of work. Like, do you use automation for this stuff? And the answer is yes, I do. But I do it in that way. The goal is to start a conversation, not to sell to somebody. And that's very important because
and to understand them, because you don't want everybody for a customer anyway, right?
Yeah. And if I try and sell to people, especially automated, they're going to ignore me. But if I reach out in a very genuine way, I just use the automation to start the conversation. I have to get in the conversation. So when I'm running these programs, I spend a lot of time in conversations on LinkedIn with people, right? Some of them lead to meetings, some of them lead to referrals. But it's a full-time job just doing that.
And so are you doing all Zoom meetings now? Are you meeting with people in person, or how's that working? Because we're in the time of COVID, so it's inevitable we're going to talk about that as well.
Yeah, we've been a virtual company, our whole existence. So it's been pretty much all Zoom.
And how long have you had the company? How long have you had the company going now?
So it'll be 6 years, and this will be our 4th year of full time. We're in it, like full time.
So you had this as a side hustle to start with, it sounds like, for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Okay. So what was that process like? Because I've done the same, where I've been working for enterprise companies and then had my internet business running on the side, and which has been, it's always been very good that way. And it's never seemed to hinder my performance with the companies, which is good. That being said, so how did that pan out for you guys?
I read, and I think it might have talked a little bit about this in the E-Myth, but I can't remember what book it was, but it talked about this illusion that to succeed as an entrepreneur, you need to drop everything you're doing and go all in and risk it all, right?
Right.
It's a big bet. And that is this false perception. And people do that, and they might win big, but they also might lose big doing that. And I said, the most successful entrepreneurs, think of IBM or Apple, or, they had it in their garage running on the weekends for a period of time before they felt it was time to switch over, right? So it's being a little conscious of what is your risk profile, how much can you handle, and how can you kind of hedge your bets a little bit, right? So
yeah, I think there's something to be said for proving the model. Having a minimum viable product, that whole concept, and proving that the marketplace is willing to step up and pay for it, right? That it is a demand. So those are key factors. Yeah, I've done both actually in my life. I've gone all in, and then I've done market validation type of process as well. Especially nowadays, the most fields are quite saturated. So unless it's a really unique product and unique proposition, it really depends on the scale of it, I think.
This whole thing with social media, for example, I never in a million years thought that I would have this as like a main offering.
So you were both working for companies and then running your company at the same time.
Yeah.
Were the companies aware you were doing that, or how did that relationship work?
Yeah. So what happened was Katelyn switched from an employee to a contractor. Then she was able to kind of balance contracts on the side with that.
As a contractor, it would make sense that you have other contracts.
Yeah, that's the nature of the relationship, right?
Right.
You know, the cost associated with that is, you know, working for a big company is they'll say, okay, well, you can't be in a management position unless you're an employee, right?
Okay.
Or at least, you know, most will, or, you know, there are costs to saying that, right? And then for me, I was very much on the peripheral, but as we got busier, as my involvement became more and more and more, you know, absolutely, I had to let my employer know. That was just an ethical choice by myself to say, just so you know, I have this side gig. And they basically said, okay, thanks for telling us. Like, we don't love it. Like, we know where this goes. At some point, you're going to either choose us or that. But thank you. Just, you know, let us know. Thank you for being honest and keep us up to date. So
what words of advice, Adam, would you have for somebody? Because there's a lot of us doing that. A lot of people are doing that. You know, working full time for a company of some stature, and then creating their side hustle. What advice would you have for people that are doing that when it comes to communicating that to their current employers, or just dealing with it in general?
You know, I was struggling with this exact dilemma.
Yeah.
And a friend of mine just said, well, why don't you just do both until one or both blow up in your face? And I was like, yeah, okay, I could do that.
Yeah,
you know,
that's an approach.
Honestly, and that's approach a lot of people take because it is a difficult conversation and you're kind of putting yourself out there. But I would say, you know, honesty is always the best way because, you know, you never know what they're going to say. You know, I don't know what your relationship is with your boss or what the company policies are or whatever, but being dishonest, and you kind of it's up to you to decide when that line is dishonest, right? Are you answering phone calls during the day? Is it interfering with your work? But ultimately, if your goal is to start your own company, but then it should also be to maintain that relationship with the company that you left, not just like, you know, explode the bridge and then take off into the sunset. So
I think a real consideration might be too, is if you're in a similar field, right? So if, you know, if I'm in building hardware, let's say, and then I start a building hardware business on the side, then
well,
that would be an area where there could be a real potential conflict, and you really want to get that on the table.
Yeah, like that, you know, a conflict of interest like that, like, I mean, you could be looking at litigation if you did something of that nature, right?
You could, yeah.
In that case, you know, your only choice, I think, is to switch to a contractor and say, I want to do other contracts. Like,
yeah, that's a great alternative. A lot of people might not think of.
Yeah, I mean, in my specific case, I was doing construction and the management consulting had nothing to do with that. So I wasn't stealing potential business from my employer. But in this case, if I was starting a construction business on the side, then yeah, now you're into ethical gray areas and well, not even gray, like that's pretty, don't do that.
Yeah, for sure. You know, I was listening to a podcast a while back, and there was a lady who had a really great approach, because it is inevitable that employees will go off in different directions when they're in your company, right? Like at some point, that relationship's probably going to come to a conclusion, and they're going to go work for the competition, or they're going to go find another career, or they're going to retire, or something's going to happen, right? And so they had an approach in their company where they ask people to develop 3 life plans. And one of them includes going to work in their passion, whatever that is, right? And then they nurture the person towards that goal. And it increased their retention.
You know, I heard about that in I think it's called Radical Candor is the name of the book.
Okay.
But, you know, and the example was in an acquisition, because I don't know if you've ever been part of an acquisition.
I have.
I've been a part of a couple now, but, you know, you're part of a smaller business, you're really proud of it, it's successful, and then boom, some mothership comes and buys you, and all of a sudden, you know, you're not sure where you stand. Are you gonna get laid off? Like, you know, if you were the VP before, well, now you're nobody. Like, so the people aspects are completely neglected. Like accounting and HR are usually aligned right away, or the legal, and then you end up with a lot of frustrated people that aren't bought into the vision of the mothership. So enter exactly what you're talking about. In this story that I heard, they said, okay, let's have some conversations. Give me 5, dream positions that you might have, or 3 to 5. And the reason you don't just say one, because if you say one, people will tell you what they think you want to hear. Well, I want to be manager at XYZ company. But if you say 3 or 4, then you're going to say, okay, I'm going to be a manager. I'm going to be, the best able-bodied employee, also an astronaut.
Right.
And then you can say, okay, awesome. So let's go through and what are the skills you need to be an astronaut in all of them, right? Well, I need to be technically sound. I need to be a good speaker. I need to know photography. I should learn art, whatever, right?
Yeah.
And then we can say, okay, how can, ENTA Solutions support you in this journey to becoming an astronaut? Because for us, it would be amazing if we could help you become an astronaut. And if along the way, those skills help us, then even better, right?
And if you don't do that, then how often is the employee sitting at their desk going, oh, I could be an astronaut right now?
Right? They're watching Star Trek,
Yeah,
whatever.
they're not focused on task. They're thinking about the other possibilities that they're giving up to be in your employ. Right?
There's a book I read recently called Drive by Daniel Pink, and it talks a lot about extrinsic and intrinsic motivation. So for years, or for more than years, for as long as you remember, the carrot and stick extrinsic motivated model, right? Here's your salary, that's the carrot. And if you don't do your job, you're out of here. That's the stick, right? And we've been motivating people in that way. But, there's been a lot of psychological and social studies that have proven that if you try and motivate people extrinsically for anything creative, like if there's any sort of creative piece to it, then your performance actually goes down. The only time an extrinsic motivator helps is if the job is like very repeatable and very monotone. So if it's just like data entry or assembly line or something like that, then adding, an incentive will actually increase production. But anything creative ones, so any professional position, anything where you have to make decisions about how to approach things or whatever, got to switch to this idea of intrinsic motivation. And this is where the culture comes in. This is where your story about, let us help you become an astronaut, because we want you to show up here. People will show up and give you 80% of their time because you pay them. What we want is the 110, and that's volunteered, right?
For sure. Yeah, I think that's an amazing strategy, and I think it could be very powerful. But you raise a good point about one of the aspects I never thought about, that is the fact that if there is a change in the company, the structure of the company, or there's an acquisition or something, then the person is already on a path. They already got a vision of what they're going to do. In my case with one company, they brought in consultants to work with me over, I think it was about 8 months, to put me on track. This is going back about 15 years. But I had a buyout and then the whole package, right? So I don't know if this would lead to reducing that requirement or that expenditure.
I think it would certainly help. I mean, the people feel lost when that happens, right? Sure. I loved working here. In 10 years, I was going to be, VP. I wanted to sit at the high table or whatever your goal was, right? And now all of a sudden, you're not sure where you stand. You're not sure who the people are. Who's these new people in suits coming to the office? What does this mean to me, right? Like,
what's my plan B?
Exactly. Change is hard and people can get frustrated. And, the other thing is misery loves company. So you be careful, because if one person decides they're miserable, everyone around them will start to adopt those same frustrations. So
yeah, in a company that could be a cancer. And you got to cut it out.
I've, and that's where, this idea about listening to people and talking to them, and, the whole idea of doing a performance review, siloed, semi-annually or annually or whatever, to me was always so absurd. Like, one of the big companies I worked with, I've been there 6 months, and I passed my supervisor in the hallway, and I went to say hello, and I couldn't remember his name.
Wow.
It's because I hadn't spoken to him. I was just working on my projects. He had his projects, and there was no interaction. And yet, semi-annual review time. Let's sit down and talk about our feelings and our goals. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. It's
not
good
how
to have a genuine
relationships.
conversation like that too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So what are you finding now as far as you're dealing with smaller companies like 25
mhm,
people, you were saying?
yeah.
So what are you finding, how do you finding those companies are dealing with the work at home concept and with dealing with COVID and the whole change that's going on?
It's a mixed bag. Like some of them that are consultants that are used to charging on an hourly basis, struggling a little bit with, well, how do I know my employees are working if they're at home? I want them here so I can make sure they're working, right?
Mm.
Flex days, right? Well, if you're in the office working, you'll get a flex day a month, but if you're at home, I don't know if you're going to the doctor or whatever, so you don't get a flex day. Stuff like that. It's definitely a transition. Like my point of view, and I collaborate with other HR experts that are much more knowledgeable about this than I am, but
Mhm.
is that there shouldn't be a difference. Your culture is your culture. If you have someone that you think needs motivating on your team, then you have the wrong person. Your people are there and they're going to work, and you kind of have to trust them. There's
Mhm.
no way around it. It's not going away. Is it going to be a black and white? We're all in the office or we're all at home? Probably not. Probably some hybrid version, but this is definitely something that good people will consider. Like, hey, if I want to go work in Canmore near the mountains, then I might take a pay cut to work at somewhere that let me do that, right? So
Mhm.
it's a culture shift for sure. And what I think complicates that even more is it's harder to connect with people when you don't have that water cooler traffic, right? Where you're connecting, in the kitchen or out in the parkade, or where you're just chatting out on the lawn, having lunch or whatever, right? So you have to be a little bit more deliberate about the connections you make and the quality of those connections, right?
Mhm.
At ENTA, for example, quarterly we call it an Innovations Day, and then I got this from that same book, Drive by Dan Pink. So a software company, I can't think of the name of it, started this thing called FedEx Days because the idea was you create and deliver something in one day.
Okay.
So we take a full day, and we actually just did this last week. Cancel all meetings, and you have one day to create whatever you want. It can be for business, it would be nice, but in keeping with this whole business idea, if you want to, like Katelyn did a painting, and it was amazing. And then
Okay.
the next day we have show and tell, and then we play Dungeons and Dragons and we celebrate, and we have this ongoing Dungeons and Dragons game going,
Nice.
which sounds super nerdy, but we have someone facilitate it, so we don't actually have to know anything about it. We just show up and have some fun.
It sounds like
But
sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying that's an example of we were doing that deliberately to keep us connected because we are a mobile team, right?
It sounds like you guys have a knack or a habit of gamifying a lot of your corporate culture and things, which is great. Um, you have this escape room. I don't know if you want to tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, sure. Yeah. If anyone's done an escape room where, they put you in a room and they've got all these puzzles you have to solve and unlock the doors and everything. Once upon a time, Katelyn and I created one that could be done in a boardroom just with paper. And we said, hey, like we can do this virtually. We've got some skills, we got some software. So we created one. And the premise is, I don't know if you've ever seen Gary Vee. He's like a big
Yes. Yeah.
social media.
Gary
Anyway,
Vaynerchuk.
yeah. So he's got this behind him. He's got this amazing office with all these trinkets, and on them is this Chewbacca mug. So we said, okay, let's make up a heist, with the disclaimer that in no way do we support
Oh,
stealing from
okay.
Gary
Nice.
Vee. But
Nice.
the goal is to steal the Chewbacca mug from Gary V's office, and you got to solve all these puzzles to get through the door and then to escape and blah blah blah.
Oh, that's cool.
So yeah, we give that away for free. I can give you the link. You can throw it in the comments here when you post this. But
Sure.
Yeah, you just play it online. It's meant to be done virtually with a team. So 2 to 4 people. You kind of log in, you do a puzzle, you have some fun.
Have you informed Gary Vee about it?
No, but we've posted it. We've kind of connected. We did that on purpose because we were like, hey, this might be a fun way to get a thumbs up from Gary Vee or something like that. So, but yeah, I mean, trying to cut through a noise to somebody like that's hard work.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you never know what's going to resonate with people like that too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
I was just gonna say another example is last summer with the team we did like an amazing race type event. So we helped these guys out with a bunch of processes and stuff, and they said, hey, we love puzzles and team building events. But the owner said, I can never participate because I'm always designing the whole thing. So I was like, can you design me one so that I can? So yeah, it was like a few different locations with some puzzles and the next location and all that kind of stuff. So.
And this was in a hiking area, or?
No, it was in a kind of a few block radius. So
it
was a small company, so they did drive from location to location. But they decided they were okay with that risk of driving. So it was like from COP, like the ski hills, to like a pub close by, to
nice.
a park and all this kind of stuff. So
cool.
That was kind of,
that's neat. So you'll help people design those kinds of activities then?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, those fall into the category, I would say, of like kind of custom sort of. It's once, like I said, we become part of the team. We become that generic sounding board or problem solver. And sometimes the problem is, my team's worked really hard. They seem really stressed. I need something to help them take the edge off. And unfortunately, because of COVID, it's not like we can just go out for a drink or bowling or something, right?
Yeah, especially now. It's very tricky right now. There's a lot of, we're all under so many restrictions, and you can only socialize so much, and then people have an apprehension of socializing too. So if somebody like you guys can help put that together, some kind of a solution, if you will, for that.
Yeah, and sometimes the nice thing about having a third party or an outsider involved is, people get tired of, the leadership or the owner giving speeches or saying we should do this or more of this or whatever. But sometimes if you bring in an outsider, it creates a safe environment where people can just do it without worrying about maybe internal politics or things like that. So we've found that's one of the values that we bring to the table.
Great. I guess it must be like, I think it's hard for entrepreneurs to figure out when they need help and when they should call somebody in, because I think in general, one of the characteristics of an entrepreneur is somebody who gets things done on his own, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of pride to that, and that is both what we found is an entrepreneur's greatest strength and then sometimes their greatest weakness, because when it's just them, they can, they got that nose for opportunity or that nose for the sale, or they're good at whatever they do. And then they got a team behind them that's trying to follow their lead. And then what can happen is now all of a sudden you're changing directions and you're, oh, shiny thing. And the team is pulling their hair out. So sometimes it's your team that's the litmus test for, okay, I need help, like focusing on one thing and like calming the whirlwind a little bit, right?
To me, that seems like it would be a challenge, trying to convince somebody who's probably pretty strong-minded and probably likes to get things done on his own or her own, and trying to convince them that you can come in there and add value and do it in such a way that doesn't, how would I put it, that doesn't undermine their fragile egos.
100%. And this is where that whole relationships and conversation comes in, right? Like we'll have conversations with people. Like we had a client that we did a bunch of work for, but we went for lunch with that guy for a year before he finally agreed to hire us, right?
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, and then if you're just messaging people online, that's where the trust comes in, right? And usually it's like a small piece of work, right? Okay, produce this document or Can you review this? The good one is a business evaluation. This seems to be a common ground that we find sometimes where the owner's like, I know I need help. I don't know what I need. I just met you. You seem cool, but I don't know if I'm going to give you keys to the castle right away. And we say, hey, you know, we do a business evaluation where we come in, we interview all your people. It's not an audit. We ask you what's great, what's not great, what's working, what's informal, what's formal. And at the end of it, we give you some quick wins and some recommendations. And that's usually a nice place to start. And then they're like, yeah, okay, yeah, sure. I'll agree. That's a, kind of a lower ticket item. And so then we spend a couple days, anywhere from like 1 to 3 days in the business, depending on how many people and how deep they want us to go, or we just listen.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that's that outsider coming in and saying, hey, like, what do you love about your job? Or, another great question is this, psychologists use this one where imagine you're going to sleep, and then while you're sleeping, somebody comes and waves a magic wand and fixes, a problem or your problems. So when you wake up, what does the new day at work look like with all that fixed?
Nice.
And, kind of gives people pause on the psychology about it is it's to help people realize that they are in control of their own destiny.
So do you see a consistent theme in the answer to that question?
Yeah, and that's really interesting because we meet all sorts of personalities and with strengths. For example, we have one client where he's very, very focused, very calm, very deliberate. And we have another client that is a little more extroverted and is like, talks a lot or whatever. And the solution for both of them is exactly the same. Okay, you should do a culture workshop, because not only does that help you define your values and your vision and your mission and kind of your purpose, but it gets the whole team excited about, hey, we're doing something, what's going on? It kind of engages everybody. And this is the kind of launch board into the next step, where we do what's called accountability mapping, where we say, this is the E-Myth thing, right? This is the hats. What are all the hats? And we map them all out. We say, okay, here's all the hats, right? You are the owner, you've got 20, but now we can look at it and decide when to take off a hat and give it to somebody else. And when we do, then we can maybe create a process around it so that it's done in a way that you like it to be done. And then from there, we've got a 3-day strategy workshop where we we try and predict the future. We talk about the things that affect your business, and then we try and zoom in on, the one things you should focus on, right? You can't focus. It's not a shotgun approach. It's narrow it down to like your one true north. So yeah, that 3-hit combo seems to be, what everybody needs. We recommend it almost every time to everybody.
So getting everybody on the same page. So doing the culture assessment.
Mm-hmm.
And then what's the second one?
That accountability mapping, kind of mapping out all the hats.
Right. And then the third?
Strategy workshop.
Strategy workshop. Okay.
Yeah.
So back to the question, when you ask people in the organization, if you wave the magic wand, what would change? What is the most common answer?
That's an interesting question. Let's see. Usually it involves making your life easier. So if I'm talking to, the accountant, it's like, well, I wish everyone would do their timesheets on time and correctly, because I spend so much time doing this, right? If I'm talking to the engineer, it's like, oh, I just wish that, we had a library of pre-built CAD assemblies so we could just drop it in. It would be so perfect. We could just move things on faster. If I'm talking to the owner, then he or she will say, I wish people would just stop depending on me for direction for every little thing and just take it and run with it.
Right.
So it's really interesting in that way, because we see then kind of a 3-dimensional picture of what is happening in the organization.
Well, I could see how those 3 answers would be super valuable, and you could come up with processes and optimize things to make there really opportunities for optimization, right?
Yeah, and to be honest, what I'm looking for there and with that question is not only understand the business, but I'm looking for champions, because
Hmm.
if I help create something, I don't work for your company. It's not going to help me if I know how it works. What I better is I want the owner to connect me with somebody who's interested and willing to take this thing and kind of be the owner or engage with it.
Right.
Not everyone's willing to do that. A lot of people are quite happy just doing their job and they don't want to get
Yeah.
involved. But it's the people that put up their hand up and say, what would be cool if we did this. Those are the people I'm looking for. So out of that interview, now I've got a bunch of ideas. Now I have a list of names where I can go to the person who hired me and say, I think that you could do this. And I think you could put Sharon in charge of it. I think it would be amazing.
So she can champion the process.
Mhm.
There probably is a need for the owner or the general manager, if you will, the CEO, to buy into the process too. How do you get that to happen?
It depends on the company. Like, absolutely, there's an approval required, right?
Because they could be the biggest roadblock to that to that person's success.
Big time. And that happens.
I'm
We'll
sure.
have all this momentum at the start, and then it will just like fizzle as something else came up, and then all this work kind of, because there's a momentum to this stuff, right?
Sure.
But yeah, that's where we have to kind of define it as a process. Okay, we're going to meet once a week, and these are things we're going to talk about. We try and make them short, try and make them very deliberate. We try and project manage it as best we can, right?
I would imagine too, if you can show, if you do things in a short term or in smaller chunks, if you will, and you can show the successes behind them, then that creates its own momentum, right?
Yeah, I created a roadmap, right? All right, we're going to start here, right? We treat it as a project. We'll create a little schedule. We'll try and stick to it. And owners love schedules, right? This is where we're going to get to where, what I paid for.
Milestones.
That type of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
What if somebody owns a company and they have that kind of situation where they think they need some help? What steps would you give them to identifying, just what kind of help they need and to know when to reach out to the right experts? Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. The thing I would say is ask your team, right? Don't try and make this decision by yourself as the owner, because automatically you're just kind of doing what you've always been doing, and it's on the weekend on a pad of paper when you should be spending time with your family. You're trying to solve this problem, right?
Yeah.
So ask your team. Sit them down like, hey guys, that same question. What are we doing great? What needs work? Blah, blah, blah. Come up with a list. Do it as a team, right? Now you got a big list. Now you can look at that list and say, all right, you guys can do this, you can do this and do this, but we're stuck here. How are we going to get unstuck? Is someone going to take a course? Are we going to learn more? Money is faster than time, right?
Right.
With enough time, we can learn it and do it. But if we bring in a consultant, we can get that value on, we can get it unstuck, we can go forward, right? So that would be my advice, because honestly, that's what we do when we come in, is we ask your team. So, if you did it,
right,
you're ahead of the game.
You can lay the groundwork and you know exactly what to talk to the consultant about.
Exactly. Yeah. I think sometimes the biggest challenge is
could even verify, your assumptions at that point.
Yeah, that could be really interesting, right? Like, okay, I've got a list, but I want you to come up with your list and we're going to compare.
Right. Is there anything else that you think you'd like to talk about, or that I should have asked?
No, I just, say to people out there, if you're starting a business or you have a business or you're thinking about digital marketing, for example, social media, please reach out. We give away like our top tricks for free. Okay. We have a course that we teach on that. So, happy to help. We're always up for a conversation if you just want to brainstorm, that kind of thing. Cool. And, we've got 1,000,001 ideas and examples of team building stuff if you want to check us out. So thank you.
So the team building thing is really the core of your business, right? The team building, culture, that sort of stuff.
That plus the process optimization. So there's like the softer side with the harder side, I guess, right?
Got it. And so the branching off into the social media, do you see that being a bigger part of your business as you go forward, or is it just is it how would I put it, something that interacts well with your core business as it is?
I'd say yes to both,
Okay.
and the reason is, I think historically social media has fallen under marketing and sales, for example, right?
Okay.
So your marketing team has a social media person that puts a post out once a week.
Right.
But through our work with like team building, through process optimization, strategy, all this kind of stuff, we're talking to people, we're hearing stories. Like the most interesting social content comes from the field guy who solved the problem doing this, and that's why it was great, right?
Right.
The the administrator who noticed a safety concern and fixed it. The the accountant that came up with a really cool way of tracking funds or whatever. These are the stories that are happening in your business all the time, and that's
So the practical day in the life stuff
exactly
that shows what people are doing, what they're dealing with, and something that the audience might actually be dealing with themselves.
Exactly. So in that way, everyone in your company is an ambassador for your company, and you want to share those stories on social media, because those human stories, those examples, because I might have the same problem. I want to hear that you solved it. I want to hear a positive story that you did it, and maybe I can do it too, right? So I think that's why it integrates nicely with what we're doing, because for us, it's not just the marketing team. Let's share those stories.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I do think there's a really good collaboration to be had there between the marketing and the day in the life kind of content. That can be really engaging.
Yeah, we actually, we work with a software called Be Ambassador. We're the Canadian representative for it, and it does exactly that. It allows it gamifies social media so that your people can interact, but that's getting into the weeds a little bit. But
and what is it called?
Be Ambassador.
So is that what's the word I'm looking for?
It's a
software for employees to somehow share the message with their audience.
Yeah. So for example, a lot of marketing teams will use something called Hootsuite, which allows you to schedule out social content. So you're not every day in a panic trying to put it up. You can schedule it for the whole month if you wanted. So Be Ambassador does that, but the difference is that it's meant for everybody, and it gamifies it. So it allows you to hook up your own personal channels.
Right.
And an administrator for the company can curate contents and can create content. So when you open up your ambassador dashboard, there's all this content that your company has created and improved, and you can grab the pieces that you like. You can throw your 2 cents, throw it out to the world. Now the cool part is that it's gamified, so you get points for doing that, and there's a ladder, so you can see where you sit with everybody else in terms of distributing content, and you can add in incentives. Hey, if you get 10,000 points, you get a day off, whatever, right? You can run challenges. If you're doing a product release, you can say, hey, we're running a challenge. Who can get the most points in a certain amount of time? And you can control what those points are for. So it's, again, combining software and psychology to try and drive a culture where people are excited about sharing the stories about your company.
Yeah, I worked with a similar platform. So we create all kinds of posts, and then of course the employees can broadcast to their audience and put their own twist in it if they want. It was very powerful.
Awesome. Yeah, we're really excited about it. We use it for our company, and it's fantastic. So,
cool. As far as your courses goes, can you want to describe that in a nutshell as well?
Sure. So it's 6 weeks long. It's an hour a week with a little bit of homework. So the reason we do that is because we want you to get in the habit of posting. That's the point. We've developed it digitally online, so you could go and take the whole course, in 8 hours straight if you wanted. But we did that so that you can log in. You have all these reference points, all this material, and that's yours forever. And then we meet once a week. But the power is we do it in groups of 10 to 12. and we try and group you in with people that have a similar network. So if it's oil and gas professionals, we try and group with other oil and gas. If it's healthcare, we'll try and group dentists with chiropractors and doctors and so you're with this group, and it's like an amplification group. So you're all posting stuff, sometimes for the first time, and you're all interacting with each other's content, liking, sharing, commenting.
Nice.
And what you're doing is you're naturally amplifying your reach, so that LinkedIn will actually start pushing you to the feed, right? Which is what you can do with a paid ad. We're not paying ads. And we've seen anywhere from 4 to 10 times the reach with this type of thing. So what we do is we take some analytics of your profile before and then at the end, and you can kind of see the growth. And plus now you're with a group of people that you can network with and amplify.
Awesome.
So
yeah, I think that's very powerful. The amount of engagement you have on a post is obviously going to help the algorithms show it to more people. So success breeds success.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll send you a link. Basically,
sure.
We give away, some infographics with kind of our top tricks. Some of them we talked about.
Yeah.
And then you can have that for free, and then you can check out the course. We run them every 6 weeks.
Awesome. Sounds like a great program. Good. Well, thanks for joining me today, Adam.
Thank you so much for having me, Bernie. This was a lot of fun.
Good. My pleasure. And hopefully we can do a follow-up sometime with Katelyn.
You can see how she keeps me in line.
That's good. Okay, well, take care, Adam. Have a great day. Thanks again for joining us.
Thanks, Bernie. Take care.
And that concludes this Bernie Chats. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for listening. Please subscribe, like, share, and feel free to comment. Thank you for supporting the channel. I look forward to seeing you on the next Bernie Chats.